open question answer session. Over to you, Professor Chakrabarti.
Good evening, and thank you, Professor Sarkar. Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to speak here. I would like to share my, I have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm trying to share it. Let's see.
Sir, kindly go for present screen.
Is it visible?
Yep, it is visible, sir.
So now it's 7:40. I would try to finish it off. Try to finish it off by 8:15 maybe. Okay.
You can go up to
maximum 8:20.
8:20.
Maximum. So thanks a lot, everyone, and for taking out time from your busy schedule. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, you are perfect.
Okay.
Your screen is also visible.
Okay.
You can go to the it is also already the slideshow view.
Okay. Yes.
You are audible.
And so it's a collective work, and it's a work in progress actually. And I'm using all those some of the published works and some of the works which are ongoing. So based on that, this is the condition of petty production in India and some post-COVID exigencies. A Gandhian perspective, it might sound a bit odd, but let's see what happens. So focus of discussion today is Gandhiji's ideas on economic progress and especially its relevance in the context of petty production of India. And if we really accept some of his basic propositions, we must have certain serious course corrections for our economy. It might be a wishful thinking, but still, as a student, as a researcher, we are supposed to put clearly straight our ideas, what we think, what we feel, like that. So, and we present some tentative thoughts in this direction. So it's not that something conclusive based on certain very rigorous empirical understanding. It's not like that. These are tentative ideas I'm sharing with the audience. That is the thing. So how is Gandhi relevant for petty production? We know it, that he is talking about charkha, he's talking about khadi. But from today's perspective, that is the lecture I'm going to deliver today, from it has a specific perspective. It has a specific point of view. From that perspective, let us try to understand how Gandhi is relevant for us. So as I quote from Young India, industrialism is going to be a curse for mankind. Industrialism depends entirely on your capacity to exploit. So emphasis on exploit. Thus Gandhi is rejecting an all-pervading heavy industrialization model that operates through exploitation using modern machines and marginalization via competition. So there are two aspects. One is exploitation using machines and marginalization, elbowing out your competitor through intense market-based competition. And he's rejecting this kind of, because we'll see also he is actually rejecting this cutthroat, so-called cutthroat competition, not only so-called modern machines. Obvious question arises, is he against all machinery? Because this is a very basic question. Gandhi replies, my answer is emphatically no. Simple tools and instruments and such machinery that saves individual labor, that is basically the target of invention. Machinery came with this, machinery came with this objective, that is saves individual labor and lightens the burden on the millions, I should welcome. So he's not absolutely against all types of tools or machines of this. So Gandhi is actually welcoming the indigenously and endogenously evolving petty machines. Indigenous and endogenous petty machines, methods and manners, not only machines, methods also, and manners, being the millions of petty producers, that is the petty production, the world of petty production, to survive. That is very important. Not to exploit, but to survive. So he is welcoming such machines, such methods, such manners, such organizations. Basically, manners means organizations, which would help millions of petty people, petty production as such, to survive. That is the fundamental issue. Not fundamentally to profit, but to survive. Now, one might ask question, oh, that's an old concept. So khadi, this charkha, why it is so important now in 2022? How can it be important? These are old-fashioned things, and these old people always talk about useless, irrelevant concepts. Might sound at pretty old-fashioned, and it's like daydreaming. May not be so. We have to look at khadi or charkha not from a historical perspective, rather in a discursive frame. So from today's vantage point, I'm quoting from one article from one very interesting book which has come up a few years back. From today's vantage point, khadi is a metaphor for indigenous technology and production methods. It implies the usage of the forces of production that people can lay their hands on through their knowledge system or lokovidya to reproduce their means of subsistence, survival. So it's basically, we have to look at khadi, we have to understand charkha from a discursive perspective. That is not a historical perspective, from a discursive frame, in a discursive frame. So why is he welcoming petty? With this perspective, that is conceptually, we have to look at khadi, not historical, that is old thing. It's a conceptual idea. You can think like this. Why is he welcoming petty production? There could be a variety of reasons. Very important is that what I find from Gandhi, I quote, you cannot build non-violence on a factory civilization. Factory civilization is founded on exploitation, and exploitation is the essence of violence. So from the perspective of non-violence, he is actually criticizing factory civilization. So thus factory civilization, exploitation, violence, these are synonymous. So factory civilization is based on exploitation, it leads to exploitation. And exploitation and violence are two sides of the same coin, according to Gandhi. Contrarily, what Gandhi says is this: a humanitarian industrial policy for India means, to me, a glorified revival of hand spinning. Once again, a metaphor for petty production. Not that going back in history, say 200 years, 300 years back. It's not like that. For through it alone can pauperism, which is destroying the lives of millions, be immediately removed. Everything else may thereafter be added. He is not against adding to it, so as to increase the productive capacity of the country. So it's a bad perception. It's a commoner's perception. It's not prevalent among the intellectuals. Commoner's perception is that he is against all kinds of productive improvement, etc., which is not right actually. So first of all, he is looking from the perspective of people at development, and that's why he's telling that you have to rely on the foundations and then you have to build on it. That's it. However, very unfortunately, his country had embarked on, and he's moving along a path of building factory civilization, in pursuit of efficiency, growth, abundance, and power. What has happened to his metaphorical Chorkha and his venerated millions, the petty producers, the petty production as such? What has happened? Despite his appeal, despite his criticism, despite his ideas, what we have seen. So we jump to today's, and let us look at some figures. Maybe apparently pretty boring, but it's not that boring. It's very interesting, actually. So if you look at employment in different sectors of India over time, and it's a pre-COVID situation. Post-COVID, it's even more horrible, obviously. We know that. Pre-COVID, what was happening, if you look at this table, what I have done is this, 3 rounds I have taken, 99, 2000 to 2015, 16. And this is agriculture. And how many people were there? 24.3 crore. It has come down to 24.5 crore. We focus today only on these red entries, red cells. Then we know we are talking about petty production. So where we expect to get petty production, obviously in agriculture, Indian agriculture and Indian informal sector, we know that. And that's why this table is consisting of agriculture and informal sector, but we have here also organized manufacturing, the big manufacturing, and these others will also involve big services, that is advanced services. So let us not go into all these things. We concentrate on agriculture first. So people are moving out of agriculture despite increase in population over 15 years of time. So long period, 1.5 decade. But if you look at informal sector as a whole, another zone of petty production other than agriculture, the next one. So there is an increase in employment here. But what is important is that within this informal sector, self-employment, be it rural or urban, is huge. Actually, there are other parts of informal sector which are a bit better off section, you may say. They are there, but self-employment is very large. Informal self-employment, rural and urban. It's not the like a doctor or anything like that. It's informal self-employment. Compared to that, if you look at organized manufacturing, we know it's very little. So if we look today's evening, as we are concentrating on petty production, we concentrate on this column and this column. And what is important is that the petty production has increased. Petty production has expanded, though agriculture has contracted. But if you go to non-agriculture, there is increase in petty production in non-agriculture as well. It's not that petty production as such is squeezing. So petty production is at least persisting, and it's like stubbornly persisting. That is very important, and that's why here comes the question of relevance of Gandhi, even in 2022. And next one is even more interesting. So what we get here is that rural, urban, non-farm, informal self-employment segment is large. And we know farmers are mostly small and marginal who mainly use own labor. So self-employment once again. Hence, petty self-employment is very large even today. Petty production is large even today. And if we look at their income, then it's actually frightening. Pre-COVID situation is frightening. This is partial labor productivity. Let us not go into this jargons. So it's basically, if we think that these are proxy income values, that is per capita incomes, annual incomes. I'm sorry. Then in agriculture, you see, this was the scenario and this has come to this. And we are measuring in 2017-18 pre-pandemic prices. So this was the scenario in agriculture. So if you look at this, it's roughly less than 10,000 per month, per head, taking into consideration all sorts of agriculture. So large, very large farm to petty farmer. So taking into consideration, this is the scenario. But very strikingly, if you look at rural self-employment, and you know this is large. In our previous slide, we have seen this is large. What the horrible situation is here. It's so bad. It's even less than 5,000 rupees. So per month, that is the income from per capita income per month from this rural self-employment. Urban self-employment is better. But what is miserable is that this self-employment, non-agricultural self-employment is even worse compared to agriculture. People might say that that maybe petty agriculture is worse compared to rural or urban self-employment, non-agricultural self-employment, but that is not the case. We have checked with data, disaggregated data. This situation is very bad, really, and it's even at times worse compared to petty agriculture. So what is happening? People are moving out of agriculture. They are going to petty non-agriculture, but they are basically going from frying pan to fire, actually. So it's not that they are moving up across income ladder or social ladder. Definitely not. This is just a representation, but we have checked it with a variety of data, disaggregated data. This is mostly the story. The condition of rural-urban self-employment segment is miserable, be it farm or non-farm. So this is the scenario after so many years of industrialism, so many years of growth, development, etc., etc. So in this context came COVID. And what was the context? Acute vulnerability of Bharat, while India has prospered a lot. We know India has prospered a lot. In this context came COVID, and we have a real threat of disintegration for petty production, especially non-agricultural petty production, because after all, agricultural petty production has some kind of fallback option because of their access to land and other natural resources. But non-agricultural petty production is kind of footloose labor. In one of my works in that book, I have used the term neo-nomads. They are like neo-nomads. They are moving from one profession to another, evicted from this area to that area. It's not only a story of urban relocation, dispossession, it's also highly visible in today's rural setup. And we know these famous concepts of accumulation by dispossession, etc. So basically, this is going on, and non-agricultural petty production is in serious crisis. The petty farm and especially the non-farm informal sector in post-COVID scenario face a credible threat of disintegration due to COVID, lockdown, shift of consumers' preference towards online transactions. We know how COVID has nicely benefited this online thing, Amazon or whatever, this Walmart, Amazon, Flipkart, whatever it is, and new players are also coming up. So people are moving, consumers are moving away from kirana shops, moving away from petty producers, and moving towards a large so-called global market. So petty production is in crisis, deep crisis. And there is a shift of global capital's preference towards vertical integration, because earlier the idea was that when there is global capital expansion, through subcontracting, outsourcing, petty production is also getting benefited. Unfortunately, a reversal is happening. And global capital, because global capital has also learned that after all, what this lockdown and COVID has shown 2020, that even in 2020, it is labor that is running this globe. If you lock down, if you lock it up, If you stop production, if you move, if you restrict the mobility of labor, whatever happens, so you cannot produce. You may have heaps of piles of capital, goods. You may have fantastic technology. It's of no use, even in 2020. That is very frightening, actually. After all, like Hercules, it is labor which is holding the globe on their shoulder, even in 2020, in the era of third, fourth, fifth industrial revolution, whatever you call it. Or so, but that global capital has understood that we have to, you have to rely less on labor. Otherwise, in times of crisis, we will be out of production because of supply problems. And so they are moving towards automation. So automation, online transactions, deglobalization, you can call it, all these are actually going against petty production, especially petty non-farm production. So in this context, our position, life, livelihood, and dignity of labor is at stake. And it has to be secured, not only because it is a basic responsibility of the state, of the society, but more importantly, it is a moral and natural right of the toiling multitude. And this pandemic has proved that even the 21st century, even in the 21st century, the globe is mostly run by people who toil, who work, the migrant laborers, the farmers, the petty producers. And if you stop labor mobility, if you stop, if you lock up people in their houses, you are gone. So in this context, what is to be done? We go back to Gandhi once again. And let us look at Gandhi, what he has to say. If we can conceive a picture of cooperation, we shall find that there will be no need. So these are people who are at the brink of, disaster, who are actually whose lives and livelihoods are at stake. So we have to take care of this huge amount of population, huge amount of labor force, huge size of humanity. If we can conceive a picture of cooperation, we shall find that there would be no need of support from the lifeless machine. Instead of making the greatest use of machinery, we shall be able to do with the least use thereof. And therein lies the real security, because this is the time where you have to provide security and self-protection of society. So if you rely on machines, according to him, it's not that reliable that you can hold the people, large mass of people who are actually at the brink of disaster, who are in a very bad situation, we know. So real planning at Gandhi again, think, because livelihood and people's lives and livelihoods are at stake, and we have to somehow provide support to these people. And we know we can go back to, and that is our understanding, that we should go back to Gandhi once again. So what we can do as a long run of this great mass of people with their fantastic labor power, fantastic production ability, fantastic innovative abilities, and skills, etc. The situation calls for a long-run strategy of forming or inducing clusters of informal firms, physical clusters for manufacturing, and virtual clustering for services. Synergic as also scale effects via sharing of tangible and intangible resources, and by collective tapping of large markets, despite being governed by the principles of private ownership. So it's not a question of cooperativization as such, That is, you are removing this private property rights. Rather, you are bringing all these petty producers who are at the brink of disaster, at the end of at the edge of the cliff. So they are, and already many of them are in a very bad situation. And it's not one or two, it's millions of people. So one option could be you put them together, and so that they can survive, they can combat with the global competition, they can survive in the global competition as well. And for manufacturing, you have to have physical clustering, but for services, you can have even virtual clustering. And we see a lot of things are happening. People are genius, actually. They develop their own methods of survival, and it's happening across the global south. Further, clusters could offer the tiny enterprises an edge in handling their conflicts and complementarities with global capital. So they have not only conflict, but also some kind of complementarities they can have. If they produce good things efficiently, nicely, cheaply, then this production, these outputs, this production as in general could be of importance for the global capital as well. That same the old concept of outsourcing, etc. This is subcontracting. So these linkages are there, linkage possibilities are there. Then if you have properly framed clusters, then you can also tag the clusters with the overall global market, link them with the global market. And also there are conflicts. In handling the conflicts, battling global capital, in competing with the global capital also, this cohesive cluster can be definitely a much better option for the petty producers. Because otherwise, individually, petty producers are powerless. They are unable to compete, and they will simply. So if we allow, actually, people might think, what happens if we don't do this? We create a dependent population for the next 20-30 years. What do we do with this? Actually, through doles, we hold them through a variety of doles. This development management is this big thing that is happening. We manage poverty, we manage unemployment, we manage human underdevelopment, but we do not provide them dignity of production, because we know, after all, labor is the only thing which gives substance to life. That is the famous saying of Albert Einstein. Labor is the only thing that can give substance to life. So we cannot give substance to life through just transferring cash to their bank accounts. They are just not consumers for global capital. They are beings, they are creative creatures. They can create effectively, shamelessly, productively in this society. So we cannot not actually, definitely in times of crisis, we need to provide support. Definitely. We cannot forget that. But it cannot be a long run strategy. The dole dependent economy, dependent population. And it's not that 100 people or 200 people, it's 100 million. It's a fantastic, if you look at the global south, it's a fantastic population. Actually, if you look at the global south, we are doing everywhere, be it South Africa, be it Argentina, be it Bangladesh, be it India, dole dependent economy. It cannot be. We cannot play with people's lives. We cannot play with people's energies, creativity, and we cannot waste it. So what is the fundamental thing we are trying to put? Clusterism, contrary to industrialism, is an economic society. The society like modernized industrialism. that revolves around hundreds of thousands of clusters. And this clusterism means economy of the masses, by the masses, for the masses, that is pitted against industrialism, capitalism, exploitation, and looking back to Gandhi, violence. As a step towards building an equitable, just, human, and self-governed world, we are not always relying on the state with capital S, beyond the hegemony of capital, Lord state, what they will do, we can be self-governed. And there is Atmanirbharata. There could be Atmanirbharata. There could be Swaraj. There could be this Atma Shakti of Tagore, Atma Shakti. So self-governed world where we can realize Atma Shakti, we can realize Atmanirbharata, and we can realize Swaraj. So we know that. And going beyond the hegemony of any god, capital, state, wherever it is. So, however, this is an endless endeavor. It's not easy, definitely not easy. And that is the task of a dreamer. You may think I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. So we go back to Tagore, his cooperative principles, to give concrete shape to the ideal of cooperation on so vast a scale. So it's not one or two clusters we are dealing with, it's clusterism we are talking about. So vast a scale that will involve endless toil in experiment and failure before at length it may become an accomplished fact. So we have to toil a lot. It just, if you just think and just you don't work, then it won't happen. So we go back to Tagore and we have to fight for it endlessly. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So I end here.
Wow. Thank you, Professor Chakrabarti, for such an outstanding exposition of thoughts. I would now invite all the participants to participate in the open discussions. There are some questions which are put in the chat box and the question answer kind of category. So I will take those up and put before Professor Chakrabarti to discuss. And also you are free to kind of unmute and ask questions also. Please raise your hand so that one by one the issues can be taken up. It might not be a question always. You can always add to the discussion through your own views on the subject that is just discussed by Professor Chakrabarti. So there are a few questions in the chat box. One question from Jai Shankar. The question is, how do you look at online education and the impact on education and educators in this global skill development? So, Professor Chakrabarti, would you like to react to this?
Actually, it is not exactly related to what I
discussed.
Yes, but it has relevance. It is not completely irrelevant. No, because we are talking about a different kind of world building, world vision in this post-pandemic situation, and we are trying to use technology to connect so that we have newer skills and people can. And what is important, why this question is important from today's perspective or today's talk, that even the petty producers would be able to learn. The idea is that even the petty producers, the people who are in far off places, they can have access to skills, they can have access to knowledge, and thereby they can take part in virtual clustering. Point is that my experience, I am in a rural setting, and a lot of my friends are there actually in schools, and their experience is very bad actually. There are schools, not even I'm talking about the deep rural areas, rural towns. So there is very deep, I would say, poverty of technology, access to technology, I'm sorry. That is asset poverty, you could say, asset deprivation. So they don't have gadgets, they don't have access to internet, and they don't know also how to use this data. And given this, the experience is not good. Now, if there is good dissemination of, that is dispersal, or you could say kind of democratization of access to technology, access to internet, access to, then there might be some effects. But my experience, so far as I understand your question, is not at all good. And what I have heard from others nearby, around me, it's not at all. If you look at urban areas, because I also taught during this pandemic, people from Presidency, from Calcutta University, and there was not that much problem. But if you look at my university also, forget about the rural colleges and schools, the situation is not good. So there is a kind of inequality that is being regenerated. I don't know whether I could properly respond to this question.
Sadhin Raza has raised his hand. If you can please ask question.
Yes, Raza. Please go
Raza.
ahead.
Thanks a lot, Shomoda, for such a nice lecture. I mean, it is always
Thank you.
pleasure to listen to you, and I really owe you a lot because I have attended a lot of your lectures, and I'm
Thank
really happy that it helped me informing my thought process in economics. So I have a follow-up question. You talked about online education. So in that case, I was listening to this Infosys director, and he was mentioning that if you bring in technology in education, am I audible? If you bring in
Yes, now you.
technology, yeah, if you bring in technology in education, then the cost of bringing in more students, be it rural or urban, bringing in more students to the education system very less. It will be very less compared to building new schools and new colleges and higher education institutions. So even if there is inequality, but the cost of including those people, you have geo internet free of cost for everyone. So like that, you can have some gadget also, the basic gadget, and some of the like NGOs teaching people, rural people or rural students of higher education, that how to get included. And once you are getting them included, then the number of students can be like any number of students can attend the classes of any of the universities, right? If you have that set up. So in the long run, not in the short run, but in the long run, what is going to happen? Like what we are going to see? We are going to see the set inclusion of those students from rural setup through making up of new higher education institutions, buildings and all, like it used to happen before, or through inclusion of technology. So what do you think so, sir?
Actually, I'm not a very, I don't have much idea with this. I'm not thought about this in deep. But what is my perception? See, when you are going for online education, you are actually taking education to households. And that is very important. You have to understand the sociology of household dynamics. Think about a girl in a village, and you are imparting education. Fine. You have class hours 10 to 4. Fantastic. Definitely, the girl and the boy, there will be a discrimination because you are not handling, you are not dealing with the problems, sociological, cultural bottlenecks, problems of those hundreds of thousands of households. So you are actually keeping the basic social inequality, cultural inequality intact. Just you are giving them education. And this is true not only if you go for, that is, it's not a question of gender only. You just think of a person who, if you push and push, you can take, and you also attract through midday meals, you may be able to drag a day laborer's son or daughter to school. But if you just impart through online, then I don't know how far you will be able to impart education actually, practically to that person. You have the two things. One is gender, another is class question, in the sense that economic class of talk. A day laborer's son or daughter, if there's a midday meal, a school, a, um, a kind of teaching community who are a bit serious about their students, go and push that no, you have to come to school. Why you didn't go to school? Why you didn't come to class yesterday? These questions are no more there. If you can combine these two, physical and online, then it might be definitely a better situation. That the teaching, the old teaching, the old school system is there, and you are also having access to online education, the materials, the sophisticated materials. I'm not talking about sophisticated in that sense. It's that is add-on things, advanced materials. Then it's fine. But if you just leave it to Indian families, Indian households, rural households, then immediately it comes to my mind, what will happen to the day laborer's son or daughter, and what will happen to the daughter when the girl, when the son is having a bit of access. He is in a bit better off situation compared to she. So these are the problems actually, and these are very serious problems, because we are not talking about few thousand households.
Thanks a
Thousands
lot.
of
Thanks a lot,
households.
sir, for your insightful answer.
Professor Jaishankar and Amit Dhingra have raised hand. I'll go to them. Just another question was put in the question and answer, and also the chat by Professor Hansa Jain. The question is: employment situation was worsening even during the pre-COVID times. COVID has further aggravated this. The emerging employment pattern is largely of the contractual or gig type. What measures do you suggest to improve this? So this is the question
Yes,
from
yes, yes.
Professor
Actually,
Jain.
the point is that if we just there is a kind of understanding that we have to go to the labor intensive kind of industrialization, and all these things are there. It's nothing new. But problem is that you cannot check the march of capital, big capital I'm talking about. They are here to make profit. Uh, you can call it predatory capital, you can call whatever you like. But point is that you cannot ignore it. So in that context, somehow you have to organize petty production, labor intensive production, petty production. And what we were thinking actually, that if you just provide them loans, the one let us put it in a more more direct way. That why are you talking about cluster, etc.? Just give them loans. That won't help actually, because if you give them loan, where is the guarantee that there will be market? I get the loan, I take the loan, and I produce, and I cannot sell. And one of my friends, he is in NITI, Mumbai, that is this institute, National Institute of Technology, etc. in Mumbai. He is running a project, and there he was very interesting. He was asking MSME units, micro, small, and medium enterprises, the over email, over phone, that there are new loans being given to you, cheap loans in post-pandemic situation, in pandemic situation, as relief measures. Will you take it, or have you taken it? Have you used that loan? They're simply saying no. They are great economists actually. They're saying no, because if I take loan, it will be a burden. I take loan, I produce, I cannot sell, because there is a serious coordination failure. I take loan, I produce. Where is the guarantee that I would be able to sell? Because there is a mass contraction of demand. It's not that one or two areas. It's a comprehensive contraction of demand. So where is the guarantee? So these problems are there. So piecemeal efforts will not help actually. Or on the other hand, if you provide them market, then okay, government buys it. Then the question comes, where from will they get cheap resources? Maybe loan is available, but input markets are also heavily controlled, distorted, absent. These are the problems. So one way out, and to my mind, it's a better one if you can cluster them, if you can keep them, if you can induce them. Like you are building special economic zones for big industry. So then why don't you build special economic zones for petty producers? Why don't you give them incentive in such a way that they relocate? In my own surveys, I asked people, petty producers, manufacturers, that if you are given better electricity, that is scope of getting electricity, better infrastructure, road connectivity, will you relocate? Then they gave me a nice answer. Maybe I won't be relocating my my shop, that is this tiny shop where I produce, but I will have an office there. I will have an office there where it's a kind of marketing, etc. Those things will be done there. So that is the thing. They also understand that how to use these opportunities. So that's why my understanding is that it's better to go for cluster-based petty industrialization, where micro producers, where labor intensive, the production is inherently labor intensive. You can to some extent not resolve, but mitigate the crisis of unemployment or underemployment, to be precise. That is my understanding. That's why I'm emphasizing on clusters so much.
So there is a question from Joplin Haig. The question is it possible for a country like ours to move back to the principles that is being laid down by Gandhiji's mode of development, when we are already in an advanced stage of liberalization and privatization? And the second question is that what are the steps that government needs to take to adopt according to you? This is from Joplin Haig.
Actually, this is a very important question. First of all, if you read Gandhi, I am not a Gandhian actually. I am not, but I have read Gandhi and I have seen that he is clear. And then you develop. First, you produce the necessities, and you then produce the surplus for exchange. So these are very interesting. He is very clear about his position. That is one thing. That he is not against trade or anything, but you have to first of all have your foundation, your necessities, and then you slowly open up. That's one thing. But that is not the most important answer. I don't have an answer. I have just suggestions. I've thought about it. That's it. So most important part is this. I've deliberately skipped or erased those slides. Without politics, you can't imagine of that kind of industry, clusterism. Left, if you look at left, the traditional left, then they think in terms of labor capital conflict or contradiction, and the battlefield is factory, where they organize. Traditional left, official or ultra left, whoever it is, they focus on labor, and they understand it like this, that the fight is against capital, labor versus capital, and they have to change the society, capture the state power, and then democratize the production system, etc., etc. But point is that clusterism could be actually a movement, a politics. I don't understand. I try to communicate with various left organizations and people, and try to communicate this, that why don't you fight for clusters? This is a politics actually. It's a role of political party. If you fight for unions, if you fight for labor through labor unions in big factories, why don't you fight for a different kind of unionization? That is clusterism. Without this politics, is absolutely a wishful thinking. So unfortunately, yes, please.
Please continue. Please continue.
So that is very important. So if we don't have, just like capital labor politics, if we don't have politics behind clusterism, it's actually daydreaming. And so the left and other people as well, they have a big role to play, redefining their axis of politics. And there is a possibility that, and if you think of their own discourse, so you are building a future world, trying to build a future world in this world. Clusterism, cooperation, what Gandhi and Tagore were trying to tell us, that, and these have happened in history, in 20th century history. Left in different countries, maybe sporadic experiences, but these have happened, that you are actually building clusters, you are actually building collectives, though you are otherwise in a society which is heavily dominated by the so-called ruling class, be it capital or feudal power, and the state, heavy dominance of state. But these possibilities are there. I don't know. I think like this.
So before going to Amit Dhingra, who has raised his hand, just 2 minutes, Amit Dhingra. I just take another question that we got from Ananya Datta Choudhury. The question is, how do tiny producers compete with big industries that are empowered with technology and supported by government policy?
Exactly. That's why I am telling that if it is tiny, if you are not, so in economics we call it scale, that is small scale having scale economies. And for that you have to have clusterism. Together you bargain with your agents, the big capital. Say you are supplying some raw material to big capital, big factories, big companies. Then you can bargain with them if you are having a cluster. And cluster experiment is not new, but what I am trying to tell is additionally is this, that there is an element of politics. If you just put them together, and if you tell that, oh, this is cluster like Tirupur, it won't survive long. So you have to have a different kind of political discourse, politics, where think of in very simplistic terms, a political party who fights for clusterism, a different kind of cooperation. It's not that old collective or something. It's private property rights property rights are privatized. And in my own experience, I have seen nice things are happening. Possibilities are there. And I won't say happening, possibilities are there. And in some cases, sporadic here or there, some nice things are also visible. So the task of social scientists and the what should I say, the people who engage in social engineering, their task is this, that they have to have a different discourse and different politics, different movement.
Amit Dhingra, if you can please unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, Professor. Very insightful and the contemporary topic which you have raised. That my question is that feasibility of your idea of the clusteralization versus the idea is that why can't we imagine a society where we do not have a petty production at all, and rather than a mass production based on technological advancement, which Kaushik Basu is talking, like the Amazon and Uber kind of a social enterprises where profit will be shared among all in terms of some universal basic income or something, and then social order of society will maintain via mindfulness or spiritual enhancement in the society. Thank you.
No, the very simple thing is that just look at uh, the, the demographic situation and also the employment scenario. So if you have to have a big industry based, democratic, definitely much more democratic, inclusive kind of industrialization, what you are doing, uh, you are um, moving, you are relocating a person from petty production to modern production. And as soon as you do that, let us assume that it's feasible, it's possible through skilling, through technology, democratization of technology, and democratization of the distributive processes. Let us assume this. Fundamental problem is that as you remove, as you relocate, productivity of that individual is 5 times, 10 times, 20 times. In our table also, if you go back to our table, you would find that compared to informal sector productivity, agriculture productivity, modern industries productivity is 20 times or 7 times, 20 times, something fantastic. I cannot exactly remember at this moment. So it's fantastic. So what does this mean? You relocate me from A to B, and you produce, earlier you were producing 1 unit, now you are producing 20 units. Who will buy it? If you produce that much of output, fantastic output, but you are not distributing the income in such a way that you are able to sell your fantastic output. Where will you sell it? That is one problem. The more fundamental, that is the big issue, that is demand, etc. But more fundamentally, given the development of technology in today's world, is it actually possible to engage all these people in modern production system? This is a fundamental question, because it is not industrial revolution of Britain. And if you look at that, is also very interesting. I think many of us know that even in Europe, when industrial revolution was taking place, Europe could not accommodate its surplus population. It has to relocate it. It had to relocate its surplus population to Australia, to Americas. So even at that stage, with so rudimentary technology, you are unable to absorb people. Then how can you think that I can remember when I was a student, there was a very famous book, An Intelligent Person's Guide to Liberalization. There, Professor Amit Bhaduri and Deepak Nair had a calculation. And there they showed that if with modern technology, we want to, at that time, you want to have, with foreign capital, etc., if you have to have more or less kind of full employment situation in India, then it will take 20 years or 25 years and something like that. So it was a kind of, and then population will increase. So first problem is that technology, and second problem is that market. Even if we assume that you are incorporating people there, fantastic growth, the fantastic production of output, who will absorb it? Otherwise, you have to think of, then comes a question of, it's kind of oxymoron. Then what you can do? You are relocating me from A to B, I am producing 20 units, you give it to me. Then there is no demand problem. Then where is capitalism? Where is profit? If I share profit like that, how will I profit? How will I invest? Where is the growth? So it's kind of oxymoron. Because the law of capital is that you have to maximize your profit, and for that you have to go for increasing organic composition of capital. That is, K by L, capital by labor, is constantly rising. Otherwise, you cannot do that. So on the one hand, you are replacing labor with capital, amassing profit, and then you are reinvesting. And if you counterpose it, you put a counterpose it that, no, we will distribute the profit in such a way that there is no problem of demand, then it is not capitalism. Fine, it's different. But for that also, you have to have well-directed politics. Corporate profits have to be distributed to the last person. These are my tentative thoughts. Please don't think that I am very clear about my position.
There is a thought from Himadrija Chakrabarti. That thought is that another that he here, then she talks about that we will have to have another presentation of thoughts of Tagore in this context in developing Polli Samaj, also the urban petty part in more detail. So she talks about Polli Samaj in the context of your lecture.
Actually, I didn't mention, some of us, you would find very interesting articles by one in IIMC Kolkata, IIM Kolkata, Rajesh Bhattacharya, who nowadays talks about urban land reforms. So it's not that you are giving titles to people, but you are giving them user rights. So it's exactly like that, that you are recognizing rights of toiling people, that look, this is your land, I'm giving you the user right. So long as you are using it, it's yours, and it can act as an incentive. So actually, when Tagore was talking about Polli Samaj, he's talking about actually cooperation. So inducing cooperation, and for that you have to recognize that they are they are actually running this production system society. So they are given the rights, at least the rights for using the resources, rights for using the space. It's like that. I don't know whether I am able to address this question.
So, is there any other person to ask any question or any thoughts that one wants to share? There are no raised hand or any no kind of a question on the chat box. Are there any questions? If there is no such question, then I would like to ask one or two.
Yes, please.
So, first of all, excellent exposition of thoughts by Professor Chakrabarti. It's a very enriching kind of experience for me. I would say that if what we call the crux of your talk can be summarized in such a way that its petty production is not actually petty. They can act as engines of growth, so-called growth, and also the COVID also showed that the inadequacy of the so-called theories of the international trade on which the entire liberalization is based, comparative advantage theory or HO theory, all these theories. So suppose if we go by those theories and we fully kind of specialize on the on those commodities where we have comparative advantage, that if that happened fully, if suppose assume that we are fully kind of specializes on certain commodities like that. So classic example that England kind of specializing fully on cloth, Portugal fully on wine. So in COVID kind of a situation when there is no exchange, there is no communication, there is a breakdown of the entire communication and exchange kind of a thing, then we would have been much more worse off if this international trade theories actually happened. But these theories did not happen. To that extent, there are inadequacies, there are shortfalls, and actually those shortfalls are blessings in disguise. That what we saved us to a certain extent. So how you like put it like that, like it is a time that we revisit this entire international trade theory and all these things, like this global kind of product supply chain production process. So this is my first question, first kind of a question or what observation. And the second one is that that relates to the Gandhi's concept of factory civilization is about violence. And here I would like to say, like to know your opinion about. You talked about Gandhi and Tagore, but I think another concept, the factory civilization, and I think from the factory kind of production, this assembly line of production, there is very similar, the similar kind of thought also exposed by Marx, that Marx's concept of alienation. Suppose in the factory kind of production, this alienation can also be thought of as a kind of a violence. Suppose there are numerous people who are associated with factory production, but they don't feel any kind of belongingness to the production. They feel alienated. This alienation has, it's not a thing that only COVID has raised, but suppose the security guard and all those things, those who play a very important role actually, but they don't know what they are actually protecting, or they don't know their role in the entire total production structure. So I think even those who are in the up in the hierarchy, they also don't know how their efforts are going to are contributing to the total production. So there is a huge sense of alienation. So this factory civilization leading to violence, and I think this Marx concept of alienation are somehow converging to a certain extent. So your thought on this and these two questions.
Just yes, uh, actually, if you have to have sustainable globalization, I would say, and sustainable international trade without going for like wiping out the petty production and create your society with fantastic burden of unemployment, then you have to check it. You have to have, because there cannot be anything called unbridled globalization. If you have that, then otherwise one the parallel institution should be a globalized state. If you have nationalized state, nations, states, countries, and then you are freeing off everything, it's not possible actually. Every state, every country should take care of its own interests. Otherwise, it cannot survive, because there could be advantages, disadvantages, first mover advantages, disadvantages of not being able to be first mover. So this is very important, because what we are trying to do is kind of, we talk about unbridled globalization, but there is nothing like that. Everybody is actually controlling trade as per his or her own necessity, and the global south cannot ignore that also. It has to play with otherwise the question of sovereignty is at stake. That is my tentative understanding. And if you talk about the other part, that is the question of Marxian question of alienation, exactly that is what is that happens in modern industry. And that's why we have that famous neoclassical assumption that labor is bad and leisure is good, because we are alienated. Actually, we do labor for you. I'm doing labor for you, and if I am doing everything for you, why should I be attached with that? Because I don't have. And if you put beside this the famous Einstein saying that labor is the only thing that gives substance to life, there is a fantastic contrast actually. That the famous this, if labor gives the only thing that gives substance to life, then how can it be bad? It's bad because I'm doing this for you, and I don't know what I'm producing, where is it going. So I'm thoroughly alienated. And here comes, it's a nice intervention by you at this point, that if you think of cluster, to some extent, at least, you can handle this question of alienation. You can mitigate the problem of alienation, because after all, I know what I'm doing to some extent. And when I'm participating in global market and giving my product to you, then I know where is it going, what is it is meant for. So to some extent, at least, the problem of alienation can be mitigated. What I think, that is a very interesting intervention. So this much I would say.
So, so we can have a kind of a coexistence of like, or like, there was a film sometime back, Bengali film. Some of you might have seen, like Shankar Modi. Shankar Modi, and like we need more of Shankar Modis rather than big buzzers. That is the gist of your.
But for that we need politics,
So
parallel politics.
parallel politics.
Otherwise, it won't survive. Shankar Modis don't survive, as he didn't.
So, but is it like is it a kind of a realistic assumption to think that our politics will change to accommodate Shankar Modis in our society?
Actually, you see, you cannot survive. You cannot have a sustainable society on doles. So what is the structure being produced, intentionally or unintentionally? It's a development management. So you have the high productive poles, global poles, where highly productive, rich global poles, where the capitalist and the skilled workers are there, the highly productive, sophisticated workers, and the rest actually has nothing to do. And that's why Professor Sannal, Kullan Sannal, actually coined the term surplus population. So they are surplus, they are not needed. Europe sent this surplus population to 3 continents: North America, South America, Australia, and also a bit of Asia and Africa, especially the 2 Americas and Australia. But we don't have anywhere to throw this surplus population. We cannot throw this surplus population to Bay of Bengal or Arabian Sea or Indian Ocean. Then what we are doing, actually, managing poverty, managing unemployment, managing, and without we, the global South. But how can you survive with this kind of society where a fantastic billions of people are actually dependent population? They are doing something, but it's meaningless for the other world. This is the deep contradiction. A few billion people is almost doing nothing, almost. If you look from the perspective of modernity thinks they are useless, because actually they don't need this population. There is a population who are producing inputs for global capital. I'm not talking about that. The outer circle, I'm talking about that. It's surplus population. And in capital, there is this absolute surplus population. It's not Marx's relative surplus population. It's the absolute surplus population. Very little, very 1 or 2 places there is, or rather in one place there is maybe the mentioning of this absolute surplus population. So it's something which had to be relocated to the so-called new world. Otherwise, you cannot accommodate it.
It's like the occupational distribution did not match with the changes in the national income distribution. Like agriculture, primary sector still having 42% of livelihood, providing livelihood to 42% of the labor force, while it is only producing 14%. So, and they are not getting absorbed in the secondary and the tertiary sector. So these are the absolute surplus. That
actually, it's very interesting question. Actually, earlier, if you look at the Marxian discourse also, agrarian question was a question. That is, you have to have a transition in agriculture to have industrial development. It's no more a question. You don't have a big comprehensive agricultural policy other than that peculiar evergreen revolution. We had green revolution, we had land reforms, be it left, be it right, that is different. But we don't have across the global south any globally accepted policy for agriculture. This is peculiar. Billions of people are there. We don't have a policy for them except to give them doles, 2,000 rupees, 1,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees, competing for doles, and evergreen revolution, which is also World Bank. If you go to World Bank 2008 World Development Report, World Bank itself is saying that it's very difficult for asset poor farmers to survive and to prosper in that policy regime of evergreen revolution. It's so costly, and it has to have more access to modern technology, etc., etc. So we don't have a policy for more than 3 billion people or something like that. We don't have
Thank
a
you
policy.
very much, Professor Chakrabarti, giving such a wonderful kind of food for thoughts for us. And I think it's a perfect beginning of these institutes. Like, you have given so much food for thoughts that this can become our research issues in the coming days. Like, immediately from your lecture, the one other thing that come to my mind is that we can have some ethnographic kind of a documentation of petty production survival kind of thing during the COVID. Suppose a chai wala, how that chai selling person on the platform of a railway station survived during the COVID when trains did not ply for 6 months. So how they survived. Though these survival stories, we need to bring those stories forward, and what happened to the those informals, like self-employed people who how they survived, and in some certain cases they did not survive also. So that may be a kind of a material for us to talk about, research. Some action can be initiated on those. It's already too late, so I thank particularly Professor Chakrabarti for such a wonderful beginning of a lecture and talk that has kind of started this our webinar series. And I'm also grateful to all the participants who have participated. It was organized in a very short call, maybe one week or so. We kind of try to reach out to people, and we were a bit apprehensive initially about the attendance, but we are overwhelmed with the kind of participation for this webinar, and I'm thankful to all. We will remain grateful. And again, before I close this, I would like to say that this institute is an open platform where people can come, people can discuss things, share their thoughts, exchange ideas, and we can talk about many choices. And it is possible that we zero down on certain choices. As Professor Chakrabarti talked about, there are few choices available, and we initiate action on those choices, and we also try to innovate the things so that things we can move to a better world. So I will again ask you, all of you. First of all, I'm very thankful that you participated, and also I seek your participation in the future engagements. And please visit our website, and we'll be also kind of engaging with you in future also. So I expect that all of you will be kind of part of this family. I would not call it institute, this family, and take this process of exchanging ideas and doing something about identifying choices, putting some action and innovations in place. Thank you very much again, and we look forward to meet you again online sometime next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good night to you.
Good night. Good night.